Hello and welcome to Raj Sabha TV. You're watching India's World with your host Rajat Kane. In this episode, we'll focus on big takeaways for India from the G7 summit held in Biarritz. Now, to discuss more on the big takeaways, we are joined with a guest on the panel in the studio, former Ambassador Dilip Sinha, Dr. Sreeram Chaulia, Foreign Affairs expert, and Pramit Pal Chaudhary, Foreign Affairs Editor, Hindustan Times. Thanks all of you for joining us. Dr. Chaulia, would you see this G7 summit once again? India has sort of accorded its position on the matter of Jammu and Kashmir, if we talk specifically on Article 370.
Yeah, I think, Rajat, what happened was that it was an anti-climax for the Pakistanis because they were hoping that it would be raised. But unfortunately for them, China is not a member of G7.
Right.
So unlike the UN Security Council, where they had used the Chinese to try and bring up some closed-door consultations, they actually failed completely in trying to bring this to the global agenda at G7. And I think Prime Minister in one-on-ones explained the position to not just to Trump, but to most leaders. The host country, France, for example, has taken a very clear, unequivocal position that it's none of anyone's business to interfere and to incite hatred and terrorism there, which is our position. There was no need for any third-party role there. And likewise, Russia has, although Russia is not part of G7, Trump wants to bring Russia back into the fold and create a G8 again. And similarly, none of the European countries, which you would normally think have some kind of liberal predispositions and might have some critical view of what we did with Article 370.
Right.
You did not find that, and in fact, they're all very pragmatic. And I think all of them are looking at India as a big opportunity. For France, for example, is not just the Rafale jets they are selling. They are hoping that with Brexit, after Brexit is over, Britain will no longer be the gateway to Europe for our companies and for investments. And Emmanuel Macron wants to attract a lot of Indian, wealth there.
Right.
So I think it was a dazzling show of Prime Minister's, personal chemistry with a lot of world leaders, where he was very convincing. Trump said, "I learned a lot about India with my friend Modi." That meant that Prime Minister actually conveyed a lot of substantial points of our interest to convince Trump. Likewise, for many of these countries, having India present there, and Prime Minister was given an opportunity to speak on digitization as well as environmental sustainability and these kind of things. India is being seen as a leader in these fields. We have some credibility because our domestic policies are achieving those goals. Because otherwise, frankly, in the past also, some Indian prime ministers have been asked to come as observers to the G7, like Dr. Manmohan Singh was also called. But the difference between then and now is, the G7 members recognize that Prime Minister Modi has been elected with a massive thumping, majority. And he has a huge, national will behind him. So it's a complete, like chalk and cheese. You cannot compare these two. So I would say that this time he not only impressed upon the world, rich countries, but also projected the developing countries' interests very strongly. And I think as a leading democracy, which is a developing country, we are able to make headway. As Dilip ji was saying, the fact that Hong Kong was on the agenda while Kashmir was not, shows that we did our work, background work in preparations, especially with the host country France, because the agenda setting usually is done by the host country. We had such close strategic coordination with France, and that's how we got this outcome.
Professor Chaulia, shifting aside from Article 370 debate or just discussion in Article 370 in G7, has world, or rather, is world seeing India as a sort of a leader or a focal point in addressing climate issues, global warming?
Well, that's very much so, Rajat. In fact, as a follow-up to the G7 summit, Emmanuel Macron sent his national security advisor and he met Prime Minister Modi, and the French government has said that global challenges, primarily climate change, especially climate change, they are discussing with India how to take the decisions of the G7 and the agenda forward, and it also merges into the larger G20 where we are full members and leading players. So yes, we are a climate leader. Prime Minister has mentioned that we are closer to achieving the Paris commitments in terms of energy mix going towards renewables much sooner than 2030. It could happen in the next couple of years. So certainly energy transition, we are showing leadership. And the Solar Alliance we have, it's like the only big concrete multinational initiative of the last several years to deal with this outside the framework of the UN, panel on climate change. So we are trying to provide solutions, and I think one of the groups, there is a formation called V20, vulnerable countries. Now it has become almost 45, 47 small island nations, including, for example, Maldives in South Asia, but also, Jamaica in the Caribbean and in the South Pacific, Marshall, Solomon Islands, these kind of countries. They are all grouped together and they're looking for leadership, So Solar Alliance, as well as, the another initiative I want to mention for the audience is, the Prime Minister is leading also a Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, CDRI. This is another initiative apart from Solar Alliance, where we are trying to pool together resources of both rich countries and developing countries, which can help in proofing infrastructure from damage during major natural calamities, especially rising sea levels due to climate change. So the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure is another of our initiatives. So there are some good ideas I think Prime Minister has seeded, and he's getting a lot of buy-in from the international community. Of course, Trump remains an outlier. He's like a climate denier still. But otherwise, a lot of developing countries, as well as the Europeans, even the Japanese, they're big on these things. Japan wants to support the disaster resilient infrastructure initiative in a big way. So if you add up all these, we've got very high credibility. And G7, I think, saluted that.
Right.
And they expect, because normally the viewpoint of these rich countries is, these developing countries, they always ask us for money. They always, saying climate finance. Why can't they do things on their own which are, cheaper and which are more cost effective? That's typically the way they look at it. So India is saying, actually, we can do a lot of things ourselves through cooperation and through investment rather than through aid. So I think climate, the response, the paradigm that Prime Minister Modi is proffering, I think ultimately is the solution. Because the Chinese are out of the solution, because the Chinese are part of the problem, because they've been doing coal-based, production and power generation, not only within China, but they're exporting. They're setting up coal-based power plants all over Africa, Latin America, and other parts of Asia. It's increasing the problem rather than containing it. So I think ultimately we have a vision. Maybe it's not very well articulated as India's climate solution per se, but through these processes like G7, G20, we are evolving that, and I think we are going to have that widely recognized.
Right. Dr. Chaulia, so is bit to energy another set of challenge for India at the global level? Do we see in days to come?
I think, Rajat, the Prime Minister has his vision on getting this. It's one of our, goal posts. We want to attain this, and definitely. But as it comes in waves, and there are times when it looks like we are getting there, but then there are setbacks, especially the Chinese. But I would say that I think if we take the Masood Azhar blacklisting as an example, see, the Chinese ultimately did not veto it after doing it 3 to 4 times.
Yeah.
And how did we bring that about? I mean, it was clear that, the Chinese don't like to stick out like a sore thumb if there is almost total unanimity on India's side, you see. So the fact that they did that at the time, and of course, I'm sure we sweetened it with some offers of our own, which would benefit the Chinese, commercially and such things. So what we need to do, I think, with the informal summit coming up with Xi Jinping, I'm sure Prime Minister will try and get him to, shift on this as well. The Chinese, of course, have long-term strategic concerns about, competition by India, and that it should not become unequal or overtake China in Asia and all that. But I think they do, on these certain issues, they're pretty, the Confucian civilizations, if you see, their diplomacy is full of face, saving face and keeping face. That's very central to the way they approach things. So for them, it's all about, atmospherics and how it will look. And China is not a, an irresponsible actor like Pakistan or any other. It's a great power. So it has that sense that as a stature we have to maintain it. And if we are seen as obstructing and blocking a legitimate case like that of India, it might boomerang on their prestige. So I think we have to play on those things as well as other things. There is a hope that the border talks will also, proceed now that Prime Minister, would want that to happen in his second term. So there are many milestones. Definitely NSG is one of them. I think the informal summit, as was being mentioned, the LAC situation is now much calmer. That is a success of the Wuhan process. And if we can take it forward with more confidence building it might ultimately get there. I don't think we have put any deadlines for this, because diplomatic goals can often run into rough weather depending on the alignments, and frankly, what happens to China-US trade war might ultimately impact what China does to NSG with us. It's a complex, interrelated phenomena.
Right.
Only few things are in our hands. So we must put our best foot forward through our diplomacy and our efforts, and then hope for the best.
Right. Thanks, gentlemen. We have to wrap it up here. So clearly, this G7 summit came up with a lot of takeaways for India, starting with the issue of Kashmir, where world has once again thrown the thrust behind India and cementing of Indo-French ties, as well as world seeing India as a major participant in addressing the issues concerning global warming. Thanks for watching India's World on Rajya Sabha TV.